Good evening. Archiving report number 0002, the River Valley Encounter. Tonight's report comes from Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta, just outside of Edmonton. The witness says this encounter occurred several years ago while she and a close friend were out for an evening walk. To this day, neither of them can explain what happened. Before the encounter itself, some background is important. Fort Saskatchewan has a long and often dark history. The area was once the site of a frontier fort, and numerous conflicts took place there during the early days of settlement. It was also home to Alberta's first prison and the location of the province's first and last legal executions. According to local accounts, prisoners were once hanged in the nearby river valley. When the prison was eventually demolished, workers discovered numerous unmarked graves belonging to inmates who had died while within the prison system. Because of this history, many locals consider the river valley to be haunted. And at the time of this encounter, the witness and a friend frequently took long evening walks through the trails and wooded areas surrounding the river valley. Since both women were busy during the day, these walks often took place late in the evening. During Alberta summers, daylight can last until nearly 11 o'clock at night, allowing them to spend hours exploring before darkness settled in. The witness explains that she felt relatively safe during these walks because her friend was a former police officer with years of training and experience assessing potentially dangerous situations. But on the night in question, the two women reached a trail leading toward the river valley just as the sun was beginning to set. The trail passed behind a large open field, and in the distance sat an off-leash dog park, as well as a single-access road. Behind that stretched dense forest and the river itself. By the time they entered the trail system, all of the vehicles from the dog park had already left. The area appeared completely empty. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, both women suddenly noticed movement in the field behind them. At first, they assumed it was a large dog or perhaps a coyote running in their direction. Both turned around at the same time. What they saw stopped them in their tracks. Standing in the field was a tall figure, very tall. The witness estimates the figure may have been close to 7 feet in height. Even from a distance, it appeared unusually large, with broad shoulders and an imposing silhouette. For several moments, the figure remained perfectly still. Then it began speaking. The voice was faint and difficult to hear. It sounded almost as though it was attempting to call them over. The women exchanged confused glances. Neither could make out its words, so, deciding it was best not to engage, they turned around and continued walking. That's when the figure began moving. Rather than heading toward the nearby road, it cut diagonally across the field until it reached the trail behind them. From there, it simply followed. The witness estimates it remained between 50 and 75 feet behind them. Every so often, they could hear it speaking again. The voice still remained too quiet to understand, though. As darkness settled over the river valley, the women's unease began to grow. The only illumination now came from the moon. They repeatedly looked over their shoulders, checking the figure's position. It never seemed to get much closer, but it also never left. The witness remembers discussing whether they should run. The problem was obvious, though. They were miles from the nearest streetlights, and running might provoke a chase. So instead, they continued walking quickly, while pretending everything was normal. They laughed nervously, they talked loudly, anything to convince themselves that they weren't afraid. Then something happened that the witness still struggles to explain. While checking behind her once again, she noticed a reddish-orange glow. At first, she thought it might be a headlamp. When she mentioned it to her friend, the response chilled her. "No," her friend said. "I think those are its eyes." The figure continued following them, minute after minute. The witness estimates the encounter lasted nearly 30 minutes. Then, without warning, they heard movement in the trees beside them. Something large seemed to be pushing through the brush. The sound traveled parallel to the trail, then moved ahead of them. The women turned around. The figure was gone. Completely gone. Less than a minute earlier, it had been directly behind them. Now, there was nothing. No movement, no silhouette, no sign that anyone had been there at all. The witness points out that the surrounding forest was thick with brush, thorns, and dense vegetation. Beyond it was a steep drop toward the river. If the figure had left the trail, they should have heard it. And if the figure had crossed the open field, they should have seen it. But instead, it simply vanished. The women continued walking as quickly as possible until they finally reached the safety of the road and nearby streetlights. Neither wanted to discuss what had happened until they were well away of the river valley. Once they reached their neighborhood, the witnesses finally broke their silence. "I don't think that was a person," and her friend agreed. Both women were deeply shaken by the experience, and later that night, while researching local folklore and history, the witness discovered stories connected to the area involving Wendigo legends and a notorious historical figure named the Swift Runner. According to documented accounts, Swift Runner was a Cree trapper who claimed to have been possessed by a Wendigo spirit after murdering and consuming the members of his family during a harsh winter in the region. The witness found it unsettling that stories connecting the area to Wendigo legends already existed long before her encounter. To this day, neither woman has returned to the trail after dark, and on multiple occasions since the encounter itself, they have reported hearing unexplained whistling coming from the trees near the trail entrance. Now, whether the figure was a person, an animal, a misunderstanding in the darkness, or something far stranger remains unknown. But according to both witnesses, one thing is certain. Whatever followed them through the river valley that night left an impression they will never forget. Before this report is archived, I'd like to hear your thoughts. What do you think these women encountered that night? Do you believe they were followed by a person? Could the darkness, distance, and fear have caused them to misidentify what they were seeing? Or do you believe this encounter may have involved something paranormal? And one final question. If you had been there, in their position, would you have continued walking the trail? Or would you have turned around the moment you noticed the figure? Or would you possibly have just tried to make a break for it? You tell me. Leave your thoughts in the comments. This has been report number 0002, the River Valley Encounter. Stay alert. Stay curious. This is the Dispatcher, signing off.